Hello, and I've been teaching English here at CRC for the past 17 and a half years. And it's my pleasure to be able to stand for the first time on this stage after all this time and present an extraordinary human being. At 13, Huang Chi-trung narrowly escapes to America with her family to avoid persecution at the fall of Saigon during the Vietnam War. Years later, she recounts her war-torn childhood and harrowing refugee journey in her memoir, Tigerfish, in the form of a letter to her daughter. The author chronicles her childhood in Vietnam and her coming-of-age story as she and her family grapple with the loss of their national identity and the challenges of acculturation as refugees in America. The book offers poignant passages through the innocent eyes of a teenager, witnessing the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese diaspora, and the jarring acculturation process that follows, all from her deeply personal and honest perspective. Huang Chi eventually discovers her inner tigerfish in America and reconciles conflicting cultural expectations between home and school, East and West, Confucian traditionalism, and Western modernity. Beginning as a letter to her daughter, Tigerfish details the bliss of a young girl's childhood surrounded by friends, family, comfort, and familiarity of home, juxtaposed to the cacophony of chaos of incoming war and the impending fall of country. Later, the story takes the perspective of a 13-year-old girl who, along with her family and others fleeing the imminent fall of Saigon, quite literally run for their very lives. In doing so, the young girl loses a shoe. This shoe, however, was not just any shoe. This shoe was one of her favorite shoes that she had acquired not long prior after she had, quote, persuaded her mother to buy for her for that school year. For the young girl had known that if she could persuade her mother to buy those shoes for her, it would be her mother's nod that she was becoming a lady. And shortly thereafter, the purchase of those self-same shoes, on March 28th, 1975, the young girl put on a New Year's dress, a fashionable green dress with yellow trim and buttons, and of course, those shoes. Only shortly thereafter to flee in those self-same clothes and shoes, along with a crowd of thousands of others who, in a panicked attempt to flee the raining of rocket fire and attacks from above, were pushed, shoved, and stepped on, all scrambling to reach the Huey helicopters and boats which promised a potential for safety. In the cacophony of chaos, her father screamed out, "Run! Don't stop!" And that was when a shoe was lost. And so continues this gripping narration of a young girl's journey. And so continues this memoir of a South Vietnamese colonel's daughter. In the story of a demise of a country, an evolution of self, of family, of community, of culture, nevertheless foretells a rebirthing nonetheless. Memoir is a genre which accounts one's personal life and experiences. And as such, it was written, and can be written, as a factual account of someone's life. The term itself comes from the French word mémoire, which means memory or reminiscence. And memoir as a literary technique often focuses on a specific theme, or it can simply be about someone's life. It is a story with narrative shape, focus, and subject matter, involving the reflection on some particular event or place. And as such, memoir allows making a connection with that which the audience finds captivating, interesting, appealing, and engaging. This honest and unwavering memoir narrates a personal experience and so serves to preserve history through the writer's eyes. It tells of a particular events that happened directly, quite literally, right in front of the author's eyes. and as such provides a window for the audience to have a look into the lives of other people. For me, Tigerfish is both a memoir and a profound and beautifully rendered love story. It is a story of respect and regard for country and culture, for family and friends, for old and for new. It is a story of survival. It is a story of an ever-evolving individual human being, an ever-evolving self. And this memoir, Tigerfish, respectfully unmasks yet mirrors the literal and the metaphoric. For within the story of a girl born under the, quote, inauspicious sign of the tiger, only to discover later that she too was also born under the mythical sign of Pisces, is a story of a quest of and for self. It is a story of a reluctant fleeing of that which is familiar. It is a tale of a fiery and watery escape. It is a memoir of a flight to freedom. It is also heroic, an epic quest, and to and from and toward redemption and renewal of a life. Tigerfish is also a virtual, poetic rendition via a young girl, reflected and morphed through the lens of an evolving self. It follows the thread, like her mother's fine needlepoint and knitwork, of a lifetime from there in the past to here in the now. This story, narrative, memoir links past to present, present to past. It is a poetic holding of a life and not the mere detailing of facts. And through Chi's artistry, the story of a human life is captured yet enlivened. And once again, as what perhaps began as a gift to her daughter, the author, Chi Trung's Tigerfish, becomes a gift to share with us as well. And prior to a few minutes ago, I had not formally met Chi. I learned of her via an announcement online from what I would later discover is something we both share: membership of the Sacramento branch of the United States Masters Swim Team. It is a swim team for those of us over 21. Details of this event, which was held in mid-2017 and partially as a fundraiser to help those survivors of the Napa fires at that time, offered to highlight an author, someone who had written a book detailing her experiences in Vietnam before the fall of Saigon. And intrigued and wanting to hang out with some swimming friends, I decided to go. And as they say, the rest is her story. So I'd like to introduce, after this long diatribe, this long introduction, Hoang Chi Trung, or Chi, as I knew her from our Sacramento Masters swim team, and yet now know as an extraordinarily talented writer whose gift for narrative, for storytelling, has and can touch us all. And Chi, I wanted to give this to you too. So, yeah, this is our, yeah.
Do I have to put it on?
Push it. Just turn it off.
She has it.
Okay.
Sherry, how do I top that? So can you guys hear me? Okay. Do I need to speak louder? I'm good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Do you have your coffee? All tanked up? Caffeinated? Okay. My name is Hoang Chi Trung, and I am so honored and delighted to be here with you all. I want to thank Sherry, Anastasia, and Diana, and the committee of the Women History Month for having me here, hosting me here. It's a tremendous honor. I can't top what Sherry had talked. I was on the verge of crying, sitting in my seat. I'm very touched to hear the reaction of readers of my narratives, my very deeply personal narratives. When I came over here in 1975, I was 13 years old. I never would have imagined that I would be here today with you all. I had 3 years of English, and my teachers were Vietnamese in the school, so of course, the words that I learned were pronounced in Vietnamese accent. So by the time I came to America, and I tried to have a conversation with folks, they invariably would say, "What?" And so I would ask them to write things down because I, could converse with them better that way. And I think a lot of you could relate to that. But I'm here, and because it's Women's History Month, I want to encourage and appeal and challenge you to leverage your privilege. I know you may not think that you have privilege, but we all, by virtue of sitting here today, we have privilege. We are alive and breathing, and that is it's on us to empower others, give them the voice, encourage them to come and contribute and have dialogues. Oftentimes, people do not talk to one another, and that's where the misunderstanding happens. And today, in today's world, we are, as a country, more divisive than ever. So I'm really challenging you to reach out to those who may look different than you, may sound different than you, eat different food, wear different clothing, practice different religion. But deep down inside, when you peel away all those layers, we all want the same thing. We want life, we want liberty, we want to contribute to society, and we want to be valued and heard. Nobody wants to be pushed aside. Nobody wants to be invisible, right? You don't want to be marginalized. You don't want to stand on the sideline. You want to be valued by your peer group. So and as a woman, I encourage fellow women to help one another, to empower one another, because our strength is the sum of our strength is by our actions, right? So let's work together to empower each other, because I didn't get here today by myself. A lot of people have helped me to be here. So it is my moral obligation to work with each and every one of you. If you choose to contact me afterwards and want to know how I did it, I have done that too with many folks in my short career of writing. So that's my pitch to the Women's History Month. But what I'm going to be doing for the short time I'm here with you, I'm going to talk about my refugee journey and my writing journey, why I wrote the book, when I wrote it, why I decided to share it, and when did I do that. So, like I said, I was born in Vietnam. I came over to America. Suffice it to say, it was a long journey. We took a helicopter ride, truck, fishing boat, vans, C-130, transporter, everything you can think of except for trains, because we didn't have any trains. So our journey was long. It took 5 weeks to get from Da Nang, my hometown, down to Saigon, and eventually got flown to Guam. And at Guam, we'd stay there for 10 days and then eventually came to San Diego, Camp Pendleton. And that's where the refugee camp, and we stayed there for 3 months until our family of 9 persons was sponsored. And the first sponsorship was a failed attempt because it amounted to really involuntary servitude, because we worked for, I think, 20 days or something, and everybody, the adults worked, and by the end of the 20 days, we owed them money. We owed them $90. So my dad, luckily, had resources. He spoke English, and he got us out of that situation. And so the Lutheran Church in Fresno sponsored us. And that was where my growing up years I spent there. A lot of people said, why do you choose Fresno? And what most people don't know is as refugees, we do not choose. We don't have the luxury of choosing where we live. We go where the kindness of strangers take us in. So I started there. So I was 13. I was supposed to be in ninth grade because I was a grade ahead. But what happened in the 70s, there was not a lot of ESL. I think you call it English learners now, right? Back then, there was not a lot of resources. So at 13, they put me in an elementary school. In sixth grade, their logic was, okay, well, you can't speak English, so we're going to put you in sixth grade where you could learn English, as though you couldn't learn it in ninth grade. So I was with the snot-nosed children, sixth grade, and I lasted about a week. And I begged my parents, would you please just put me to junior high or something? And they did. They put me in junior high. And I was in seventh grade, and I completed my seventh grade. And then the next year, I was at the right grade, 10th grade. And so I continued my education to college, and I went to Fresno State, and I graduated with a degree, a bachelor's of science in industrial technology in manufacturing, drafting, and design. So basically, in manufacturing operations. I asked my dad if I could be an art major, and he said, honey, we didn't come all this way so you can be an artist. We need you to make a living for yourself. Choose something pragmatic. So a lot of you probably can understand that. Your parents work so hard for you to be here. They're so afraid that if you choose something like that, you couldn't make a living for yourself. And so, of course, I relented, and I went to the opposite directions into a very technical field. And I'm glad I did, because when you make some money, you can have the luxury of doing hobbies. And that's just my own personal experience. I'm not giving you guys advice. But so that's where I graduated from college. And then I moved to Sonoma County, where my husband had a job in winemaking. What brought me back to Sacramento was my husband, in 1992, got a job at Bogle Winery as a winemaker. Do you guys know where Clarksburg is? Really? It's not very far from here, actually. 160. So anyway, so that actually was where the book was born. In 1992, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I was lucky enough to stay home with my daughter. And I was just watching her sleep, and I decided she has no idea where I came from, how I got here, what life was like for me as a child, how did I escape, what my parents sacrificed for me and my siblings to be here. So I felt an obligation to record my family history. So I started to, bang out my, then was just a journal, and then it became a memoir of sort. So I wrote everything, and in the process, I realized why I have been angry and didn't know why. So here I was, I have a 2-year-old, a beautiful family, I had a loving husband, I live in Clarksburg, a beautiful place, and yet there was a bout of anger. And I had no idea why. But once I started typing, I cried. I didn't even know that I was crying, and my keyboard was really getting wet. I thought, I don't want to be electrocuted or whatever here. So I realized that all of these feelings I have been repressing, because as a refugee, we have this, what you call delay grief. And a lot of survivor's guilt, right? Because we were lucky enough to made it alive to America. And who are we to complain about little inconvenience of life? So what if my dad had to be going from being a colonel to being a janitor of a church? So what if my sister had to stop college and work in a laundromat? So what if my brothers never done dishes in their life, became dishwashers for a Chinese restaurant in Fresno? So what if we had to wear Salvation Army clothes? Back in those days, they didn't have small people's clothes. Everything were gigantic. And of course, my sister was so good, and we would go to Salvation Army, we'd get some clothes, and we'd bring them home, and she would tailor them. You have pleats on the waistband so we can wear them. And so we made a lot of changes without talking about, the sacrifices, because we thought that was normal. We're alive. It's normal. We're in America. That was always the default line that we go to. Well, at least we're in America, right? So I wanted my daughter to know about her history. So it took me about 5 or 6 years to write it all down, basically just chronological. And then there were points in my life that made a real impact on me. I focused on those, and I went back and I add details to those. And then I started to add photos. So for those of you who I encourage you to record your own history, because our narratives are not being written in history books, right? History books are for victors, for powerful people. They dictate how history sounds and looks. But our stories, they're very important because they need to be woven into the American history, the U.S. history pages. And not only that, you write so that others feel like they are not alone. I wrote it originally from my family, but since I've written it, it has helped me deal with my grief, deal with my anger, and since then, I don't run away from those feelings anymore. I've become a healthier person because it's very cathartic to write your feelings down. And I was petrified when I published the book. I didn't know what my parents were going to disown me. I didn't know if I'm going to get hate email. I didn't know if I'm going to be trolled. But that didn't stop me because the feeling and the need of sharing my story is so strong that it didn't matter. I felt like it was an important narrative, and I'll go back to say why I felt it was important. But my story I wrote 6 years or so, one day when my kids were in school, about 2001. I sat down to read my manuscript, which I thought was finished, because it was just for the family, right? Just for my kids. I sat down and I tried to read it, and I fell asleep. And I thought, my kids, they're not going to pick this up, And so I thought to myself, why don't you take a class in writing? And that's exactly what I did. I took 2 classes, guess where? Right here, Cosumnes River College. I took 2 classes. One is philosophy from Dr. Schubert. I'm not sure, I don't know if he's here today. But the other class is writing for publication. I believe his name was James, and I can't track him down to properly thank him. But from those classes, I have cleaned up my writing in vignettes, like scenes of movies, you know what I mean? And then I add details so that when you read my story, you feel like you're right next to me. You feel everything I felt. You taste everything I tasted. So that I took you, when you read my book, you know that you either going through the journey with me or understand what it is that was going on at that point. And it gives you a historical perspective. It gives you, there's a lot of social issues in the book, being Asian American, coming of age. There's a lot of culture clash that I had to deal with my own family. So that's where I learned how to put my book together. Even though I graduated from a CSU system, I'm a true believer of the community college, Los Rios Community College, because without those classes, I wouldn't be here, honestly, to be speaking with you. The teacher was very effective and was really helpful. And fast forward, I also took a GIS certificate at American River College. Then that really helped strengthen my skills in GIS and launched my career at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, where I was promoted to be GIS Chief, Division Chief. What I did was online response mapping for disasters. So I was involved with like the Napa earthquake, a lot of the fires, and some civil disobedience, that we had to map, and coal weather maps for, like where do you go for shelters and things like that. So that's what I did prior to becoming a full-time author. Why did I write the book? I explained it's for my children, and I did it a long time ago. And just so you know, when I wrote the book, it was never, ever intended to be public consumption because it's so personal that there was no way I would have shared it. But now that I'm, when I published it, I was in my 50s when I published it. And I thought, those personal details, now that I'm older, they don't really, they don't embarrass me that I share it with you, because the value of you reading it and other people coming of age reading it outweigh my little personal embarrassment. It's not even, so I think it's worth it. That's what you do, is you do this analysis, right? How much of your personal sacrifice would outweigh, the embarrassment, and it would provide values to so many people. And that's when I decided it wasn't, it's no longer my personal story, it belongs to the world. In 2011, that was my critical moment, because that was when the Syrian refugee crisis happened. And I saw a lot of, what's going on with the Syrian refugees, right? It started way back in 2011, believe it or not, if you don't remember. Because it just started, it seems like the world is not really doing much to help the Syrian refugees. And there's other refugees too, but the Syrian crisis really made an impact on me. And I thought, I have my American dream. There are a lot of people who helped me every bit along the way. They didn't push us away. There wasn't any non-white refugees and immigrants like what we're experiencing right now. There were some, but not to the extent that we're experiencing now. So I am the product of compassion, of kindness in America. And that is how I got to be here with you today. So I feel like it's my moral obligation to talk about what it means to be a refugee. Just because I have my American dream, it doesn't mean that, well, too bad, so sad for those who can't make it, So I feel this moral obligation to speak up and to put a name and a face and a narrative of a family who love each other, who want the same thing you all want, life and liberty, and a way to provide for the family. So Tigerfish, that face, I chose that picture of me when I was 10 years old. At the time, that was my very first student ID photo for high school. So back home, in those days, I don't know what it's like now, but in those days, 6th grade was high school. So that was significant because I have crossed that threshold from elementary school to high school, so that was something. And as you can see, I have the Mandarin collar dress. That was my school uniform. And so I used that to connect the face and what it means to be a refugee. I want to reclaim the word refugee because it has a lot of stigma. Nobody wants to talk about, refugees, and they rather talk about something more glamorous. But I bet you a lot of us in here, we're either children of immigrants or refugees, or we are refugees ourselves or immigrants. So it's really important for me, now that I have a voice, to give voice to those who didn't have a voice like me when I was when I first came over. It's very important to humanize our experience and to say, this is what it's all about. Being refugees doesn't mean that we want to come here and take your jobs. In fact, we took the jobs that nobody wanted. And we contribute to society. All of my family members have contributed greatly to this country. And we've gone to school here. We have children here. 5 more minutes. Okay. So there's so much that I want to talk about. So I'm going to look and make sure that I hit the key points. But so I talked about why I wrote it, when I wrote it, and the reason why I published it. So I didn't write it to publish it, but here it is because I feel that it's really important in this political climate. And to really honor those who didn't make it here. Our family and I were lucky enough to make it here alive and make a life for ourselves, so I owe it to those who tried and didn't make it. And for all those refugees are still in camp, waiting for a home. I speak on their behalf. I'm going to go quickly through here and see what... I think that, when we do the Q&A, it will become apparent. If you have any questions that, we could address it then. But I wanted to talk about, the stigma and the model minority myth. I want you to know that I work really hard on my behalf. Working hard on your behalf as the model minorities, that somehow we were born to be really good in math, right? And to be really successful and have a lot of money. I couldn't tell you how a false narrative that is, because Asia is a very big continent, and there's Southeast Asians. Those are the populations who suffer the highest rate of college dropout. And so we need to understand that not all of us Asians are the same. We need to address that so that it will affect policies for funding to help those who are in need to be successful. And for those who, we suffer this expectation, so we don't speak out and say, I need help. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of your professor's office hours. Go and talk to them. That's what they're there for, right? Don't feel like you can't ask questions because it makes you feel like you're not smart. But in fact, the one who asks questions are the one who paved the way for knowledge for the other ones who don't ask questions. Have you noticed that? Somebody asks a question, say, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to know. So ask questions. If you're too shy, use the office hours. That's what they're there for. They want to help you, right? How much time do I have? Perfect? Oh. If you don't mind, I just want to make sure. I talked about model minority, and that was really important. I want to highly encourage you to start documenting your journey. Because if I have to write my story now, I wouldn't remember anything. I did this almost 27 years ago. And start talking to your auntie, uncles, your parents, start accumulating photos, Because even if you don't write the book yourself, maybe your kids will, maybe your husband will, maybe you hire a ghostwriter, but it's really important. So honestly, when I came over, I never thought that I'd be here. I could hardly speak English. And, you know, we were really poor. We had to be on food stamps. I think one year my dad was laid off right before Christmas. And they said, no, you're laid off. And so we had to use food stamps. And I remember I was so ashamed to go up to counter and pay for my food, and the cashier was my friend in class. I'm sure I was beet red. I was so ashamed. And I told myself at that point, I will never be poor again. I thought, there's no way. I would do anything to go to college, make sure I graduate, and provide for myself. And so it is my obligation to encourage you to do well in school. I know that it's a cliche, but that paves the way for better understanding of other people, right? It opens your eyes and heart to other cultures and advancement that you don't think that, you know, there's things happening in the background that you never know or have understanding. I never knew that I would be invited here. So things work in a mysterious way. Do a good job in what you do, and things will happen. I mean, I quit my job at the governor's office at the height of my career and to do this. And just last couple of weeks ago, the company Esri, you guys know about Esri, they're like the biggest company for GIS, and I've won a lot of awards with them. But what I'm trying to say is 3 years after I stopped working in GIS, they reached out to me and said, we selected you to be GIS Hero for Spring 2019, not only because of your GIS leadership, but because your advocacy for refugees and immigrants. And that really touched my heart, and I was shocked. I mean, this came out of nowhere. So my message to you is, do whatever it is that you want to do. Do the best job that you can do. Good things will happen. Be kind, stay curious, and take classes. You know, I took classes from this community college and also American College, and those two campuses are dear and near to my heart because of those classes. The sky is the limit, you guys. So with that, I think I will open up for questions. And don't worry, I won't bite. Yes?
What sets your memoir apart from other memoirs?
You know, that's a great question. I've read a lot of Vietnamese American memoirs. All I could say is I was being very truthful. It's very difficult to dance that dance being truthful and being loyal to your family. You got to be careful about, because they have their own, they have their identity. By the time I published my book, my parents were still alive. All of my siblings were still alive. And they're still talking to me, so I'm doing okay. But be truthful. And it's a narrative that you don't hear from the Vietnam War. From the Vietnam War, you hear a lot from the soldiers. You hear a lot from the politicians. I'm from the perspective of the humanitarian side. Just a narrative of a teenager. I didn't take side. I try not to take side. I just basically told the story as I lived it. Try to be honest, but respect other people's privacy. So I think that's the case. I don't know. I think the readers, like Sherry, Professor Sherry, I was having goosebumps. I didn't know that this is how my book was being viewed. So I think when you read the reviews, it probably came out how and why it made an impact on them. I think because I made the visual pretty strong for them and appealed. You know, it brings up a lot of emotion that they can connect. I think that's what it is. It's very relatable. Even if you're not a refugee, you understand what it means to be marginalized, what it means to be not seen or heard or valued, and how to climb out of that. And speaking of climbing out, a lot of people say, if I can do that, you can do that. And actually, I do not think that is very helpful. Or pull yourself up by your bootstrap. I do not think that's helpful. In fact, these things are dangerous things to say to people, because what if they don't have any boots? What if they don't have any feet? You know, you and I and everyone here are born in different circumstances. So I can't judge other people from where I am. You know, I listen. I try to listen and listen with empathy. And that's what I'm trying to appeal to you and challenge you to listen without judgment, without thinking what you're going to say next. Really listen to what they have to say. Believe it or not, my mantra is I'll talk to anybody who'd talk to me. Because of that, I have benefited from their wisdom, and we became friends when we once were strangers. So that's a long answer to your question.
Oh, we'll come around with the. Oh, okay.
So I teach ESL here, so I've got many of our wonderful students who see Professor Crescent over there as well. And I really like what you. First off, I look forward to reading the book.
Thank you.
My mother came over from Germany after World War II, married my father, who's American GI, and her story as a German woman was not very popular at the time.
Right.
And I learned the language in high school and college. And to this day, I just wish my mother had written for her story. And there was one time I got her talking, and I was trying to not let her know that I was typing. And I just thought, like, one short story from their house we saw of them. It's just amazing stories. Even if you don't have the war-torn history,
Right.
write your stories, and they're amazing.
So thank you so much for that observation. And I want to point out a couple things before we run out of time. Is my email address is in the inside of the book, but if you want to reach out to any of your professors, please reach out to me, because if you have any question on how to start working on your book or your memoirs, or not even a book but documentation, I'd be happy to walk you through it. I think I have like a generic outline that I can send you to share it with you, because I sincerely want you to document your history. And the other one, real quick, is about the GIs. You were talking about GIs, that kind of jot my memory. A lot of the American veterans from the war have written to me after they read the book. And I'll distill it to these commonality points that they had. The first thing they said was, "We're really sorry what we did to your country," or "I'm really sorry what I did to your country and your people." And they said, "But I'm really grateful, we're really grateful that you share your story, because we always wonder who we served. We wonder who we sacrificed for. Where are they? What were they doing at that point? How did they feel about us? And what are they doing now in America or wherever because it's a diaspora. A lot of us ended up in Australia, in France, in America, and I'm sure other countries that I don't know about. But that was the feedback I never expected. I didn't expect the veterans who would reach out to me. And my response to them would be, you and I, we suffer the same, we're both victims. You were 18, 19, you were sent to a country, far-flung corner of the world, and sacrificed your youth and probably your body for the war. And I didn't choose to be born in a war-torn country, and suffer all the consequences thereof. So you did what you needed to do. I did the best I could do. So we both are victims. We're victims. So I said, I don't know if that helped you with your closure or your well-being, but we're good. I can't speak for all of us, but from my standpoint, I do not hold any ill will. And that's something that's really important. I don't hold my parents for some things that I suffer with, like culture clashes in high school, the difficulties I had when I met my boyfriend outside of my race that didn't score points with him at all. But at some point, you just have to reconcile that with yourself. And how do you do that? A lot of times when you write it down, then you can see your feeling coming out in print. And if you contradict yourself, you'll see it in print. So it's a process of reconciling these feelings. And maturity, as you get older, you're more forgiving, I feel. Maybe scratch that, maybe that's not a good thing to say, but I think that it comes with experience. I think that's what I'm trying to say is, it's just like everything else, right? If you want to be a good swimmer, you go to practice. If you want to be a good violinist, you practice. If you want to be a good English speaker, you practice. So it's like that with everything. You practice to forgive. You practice to have discipline. Show up, and good things will happen. Right? Participate, move in slowly. And I was painfully shy when I first came over. You can get me to say anything to you. But then, slowly, I just, had one toe in the water, and then pretty soon and by the way, I didn't know how to swim. I learned how to swim first year in college. And then when I joined SAC-Master, actually I went to the Laguna Creek one. And I said, I want to join your masters. And he said, well, swim a lap for me. I couldn't even finish my 25 yards. And he said, go practice some more and come back and join us. And I did. I practiced on my own. I took some lessons. And before you know it, I was competing with the SAC Masters. I was very slow, but at least I showed up and participated. So I didn't know how to ride my bike until 11 years old, and I snuck it because my parents they were worried that I would hurt myself falling off the bike. So I snuck it, and I learned how to ride bike. So I didn't know how to ride bike until I was 11. I didn't know how to really swim until I was like 19. But even then, it was more like treading water, not really swimming. So I talk too much. Any question? Yes? I don't know if everybody can hear.
The question was, could you share some of the cultural clashes that you experienced coming over here?
How much time do you have? Okay, so the first one, well, there were a lot. The initial one, I was put in junior high school after 10 days, and I didn't understand how the kids went to school without any notebook or pencil. They were wearing really revealing clothes, the girls. And the boys were really rough looking. So they just show up for class, they just like slouching in their seats, didn't pay any attention to the teachers. They were disrespecting the teachers. And I don't know who's old enough to know about Welcome Back, Kotter, that show. So I thought, oh, so that's what school in America is. I didn't understand what was going on in Welcome Back, Kotter either. And so that was difficult because the talking back to the teachers, it's just something that it's incomprehensible to me. We were taught to just listen. And in Vietnam, I think it's a Confucian system, not just in Vietnam. We put our parents and our teachers at the same level. We don't talk back. And so that's the hard thing too. Those with that kind of value system, you're probably afraid to ask your teachers questions. But the American teachers aren't like that. They want you to ask questions. They know that by asking questions, you want to learn. You're not questioning their authority. You're not questioning their knowledge, right? So I encourage you. That's a big culture clash right away. And then, of course, meeting my husband, who's 6'2", blonde blue, that was a book in itself. But we'll talk about that later.
We have another question over here for you.
Thanks. So I saw in the slideshow in the beginning that you did end up going back to Vietnam. I was just wondering what that experience was like the first time you returned to Vietnam.
Very good question. In 2005, it's our 30 years anniversary of the fall of Saigon. My husband and our 2 teenagers-ish then, we went there with my niece, and she's blonde hair, blue eyes, and everybody wanted to touch her. They thought she was the most beautiful thing. This is 2005, so most people didn't know where America was. If you say the U.S., or USA, then they knew. But if you say you're from America, they had no idea. And a lot of them would think, oh, my husband is either Canadian or German. You know, we weren't your typical American tourists at that time. I was really scared to go back because it took everything for us to leave and to come back. You know, the last name Smith, my married name is Smith, and for having that last name, it comforted me a little bit because I was really worried, what if they still have this blacklist of Colonel Truong's, family? But because I was with an American husband and a Smith name, they didn't know who I was, and that was fine. But besides that, I was so afraid that somehow I get thrown in jail. And don't ask me why. It's just something that you lived with all of your life. And to go back to it seems so counterintuitive. But I did it to kind of settle peace, to get peace, And not only that, to show my family where I came from. And so 3 weeks, we went from the south to the north, and we ended up in Hanoi. And that was a really surreal feeling because back in the day, Hanoi was the north, right? The communist north. I would have been in deep trouble if I was in Hanoi. There was no reason for me to be there at all. So to be visiting Hanoi and to speak to the people who were supposedly my enemies were really endearing yet very surreal because these are just people like our family. They struggled through the war and they were in deep poverty, abject poverty, not like the South. Compare the two, they were a lot worse off than us. So I reconcile with my enemies. These are supposed to be my enemies, and I was amongst them, and we're one people. So that was very poignant to be with my own people. And at last, we're not under the imperialist rulings. So that brought me peace. I didn't cry except for 2 times. I thought I would cry upon landing, but I didn't. I cried when I heard a French song playing over over the sound system in a restaurant. And it was a vintage songs from the late 60s, a French song. And that made me cry because we listened to French songs all the time and American songs. So by the way, I watched the same TV shows my husband watched when he was younger in America. Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and all that. The difference is he understood everything, I didn't. We just watched for the, just for the action, I guess. So it helped me with my survivor's guilt because the people of Vietnam, even though they're so poor, a lot of them did markedly better than when I left. So it was a good feeling when I left.
And we have one more question in the back. We have time for that?
Yes.
Anastasia, are we doing okay?
Chào cô Chi.
Chào anh.
Yeah, I'm Vietnamese, same you, but actually my story is we fled the country, Vietnam, during the war also, but is it after the war, slightly, 79. So with the boat people, but just wanted to say, compared to your journey, and have you ever talked to or had a conversation with refugee boat people in terms of sharing stories and collating and also do you still do the traditional Vietnamese, Tết and
Yes.
celebration and do the language talking to your kids at all?
Thì không có nói tiếng Việt Nam với con. I don't have conversations with my children in Vietnamese, and that's my one and biggest regret. And I'll tell you why. But there's about 3 different questions in your question, so I'm going to address one at a time. So I have heard different narratives from Vietnamese that I come across, whether my friends, we do share stories. When we first met some refugees in Fresno, we would retell our stories. And that was when we would cry and laugh about it. And then I read a lot of Vietnamese American books. One is called Where the Wind Blows, I think. That's an extraordinary good book that talk about the boat journey. And also, there's a new book called, I think, Bánh Mì Sandwiches and something. I mean, it was a new book. And she talked about her journey on boat as well. So those are the two books I highly recommend. So I think your other question is, do I practice Tết? So Tết was 4 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. So I do cúng, I offer food. I make the bánh tét, bánh chưng, củ kiệu. I made all the different things. And my mom passed away last year, so I learned all about ancestor offerings from her. So I do all of that, and I include my children. So just so you know, Buddhism is not a religion, it's just a value system, and I was raised with Confucian and Buddhism. And I think you have another question in there. Oh, about my children. So the reason why, and I'll tell you, when my daughter was, I spoke to her in Vietnamese when she was born, and the problem began when I was reading to her. Picture books were fine, I can translate, apple, táo, whatever. But when it became storybooks, it was futile for me to try and do that. So in my effort to combat that, I'm going to, and nobody knows, I haven't announced this publicly, but my daughter is expecting, she's going to have a baby in July, and I'm going to be the grandmother in her home, and I'm going to try to redeem myself. I'm going to try to speak Vietnamese to the grandchild, so and write books. So I do have a children's book. It's called No Ordinary Sioux. And it's not about war refugee, but it's about disasters refugee when we had the flood in, I think, 1998 or something like that in Clarksburg, Sacramento area. But I want to illustrate and write Vietnamese books so that I can bring up my grandchildren bilingual. Did I answer all your questions? Cảm ơn you.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and take it from here, Anastasia?
So, Chi, thank you so much. That was very inspiring, and we're so glad that you could come and reveal that you are a CRC alumna, which is fantastic. So that's always really great for us to hear.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we did say we were going to give away 2 copies of Chi's book, and actually also as you were talking about writing, I had a couple thoughts. One was to bring you back to do a writer's workshop, which maybe the English faculty could help facilitate that. And also perhaps you could email us a reading list and we'll post it on our Facebook page, which would be fantastic.
You mean about the Vietnam diaspora?
Yes, so any books that you would recommend people to read would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
So Chi also brought her books, which she will be selling in the lobby for $10 after the presentation, and she's happy to sign them. If you are either Janice Tran or Aaliyah Harold, you are the lucky recipients of these copies, so you can come see me in the back in the lobby, and I will give these to you. One more time, please thank Chi for coming today, and happy Women's History Month.
Thank you. Thank you. You have been such gracious audience, and I am here for you. I usually say to my audience, this is not the end of us. This is only a beginning. I encourage dialogue. Please write me. I am local, and I want to help you with your documentation of your history, because that's what makes our country a better place to live and not divisive as it is right now. So thank you so much.